The biggest story of the past 24 hours is Alabama star Brandon Miller's involvement in an incident that resulted in the death of a 23-year-old mother named Jamia Harris. For those unfamiliar, here's the deal. Let me catch you up on where we're at. Last month, former Alabama player Darius Miles and his friend, a guy named Michael Davis, they were charged with capital murder. Miles' gun was the alleged murder weapon. Davis reportedly was the shooter. We've all known all of that since January 15th. Then, on Tuesday, just yesterday, we learned more, specifically that Brandon Miller, Alabama's five-star freshman, best player, is reportedly the person who brought the gun to the scene of the incident. That's what police detailed Tuesday in court. They testified that Darius Miles texted Brandon Miller to bring him his gun after he and Michael Davis had a run-in with Jamia Harris and her boyfriend. In the simplest of terms, it appears that Miles and Davis were trying to talk to Harris. She wasn't interested, told them she had a boyfriend. Then her boyfriend, a man named Cedric Johnson, reportedly told Miles and Davis, like, hey, it's time to move it along. And that's when Miles reportedly told Miller to bring him the gun. He did. And then Michael Davis eventually got the gun, reportedly said to Cedric Johnson and Jamia Harris, quote, I told you I was going to get you. And then he started firing into the vehicle, at least 8 shots. One of them hit Jamia Harris in the face. Minutes later, she was dead. And now we know the gun that was used to kill her was brought to the scene by a projected first-team All-American for a projected number 1 seed in the 2023 NCAA tournament. Tuscaloosa Chief Deputy DA Paula Whitley, she was asked on Tuesday why Brandon Miller hasn't been charged with a crime. Seemed like a reasonable question. She said that there's nothing they could charge him with. Now, I'll let the lawyers determine whether that's true or false, but either way, there is literally nothing stopping Alabama as a school or a program from punishing Brandon Miller in some way. To date, the school and the program have at least publicly done nothing. And in some regrettable comments on Tuesday afternoon, Alabama coach Nate Oats chalked it all up to Brandon Miller simply being at the wrong place at the wrong time, which is obviously a ridiculous way to categorize this situation. Norlander, thank you for your patience, but I did think it was important to lay everything out before we discuss it further. Now, I've done that. So let me start you with this. First question. Are you surprised Brandon Miller has played 10 straight games, started 10 straight games since taking a gun to a place where it was used to kill a woman? And even if you aren't surprised, do you think it's appropriate?
Yeah, I'm not here for the cynicism. I am surprised, okay? And there's been a lot of this, oh, what did you expect to happen? It's Alabama. He's a first-round pick. He's a top 10 pick. He's a top 5 pick. He's the National Freshman of the Year front runner. No, I expect someone charged with leading a program like Nate Oats to take proper disciplinary action. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert in law in the state of Alabama. I'm not here to talk about whether or not Brandon Miller should have been charged in this. Can't speak to that with an expert legal mind. Not going to pretend to, not going there. But what I do know is everything that Parrish just laid out. Frankly, I've heard from many coaches, assistants and head coaches at the power conference level in the past, however many hours this has been since this broke, that the question everyone is asking is, how did Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley not serve a suspension? And is he really actually going to play tonight? And I was told by a source, I haven't talked to Nate Oats, but I was told by a source that as of this hour, yeah, the expectation is that Brandon Miller will be available for Alabama's game on Wednesday night. Oats followed up with a statement after, a bad choice of words. They're at South Carolina. It's as nondescript of a conference game in the SEC as Alabama could possibly have this season. Frankly, why not just, you've taken a lot of L's here. Why not just take the easy win and just not play him? But that's a discussion for another time. Maybe that changes by the end of the evening. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But with all of the details there, the thing that just doesn't sit right after the fact is that quite clearly Oats, Alabama Athletic Director Greg Byrne, school president, board of regents, enough people in power had to have known the details here. because Miller's car had bullet holes in it, his windshield. He drove to the scene. There are still, I read all the reports I could read that came out of this yesterday. There are still a few things that need further explanation, but it appears as though while Miller was around the scene, he wasn't actually at the scene when it happened. It appears that way. The testimony under oath did not indicate that Miller was in the presence of this, and even one of the law enforcement officers said under oath that Miller did not see the actual shooting, the exchange of gunfire take place. Even learning more of these details, yeah, we have a woman, a mother dead in this, and it's kind of a shock that there wasn't at least one more. I mean, this is apparently I've never been to Tuscaloosa, but this is a very busy part of the downtown area, relatively close to the football stadium, and this is a horrific situation that could have been much worse. I just don't understand why Oats and that program didn't opt to do the right thing and have some disciplinary action. If you just take it on its face, Miller receives a text message from his then teammate asking him to come on back downtown and using language that would indicate he's asking him to bring his gun. And it's, 1 a.m. What common sense has got to apply here. And again, this is completely separate with whether or not Miller has been charged, should be charged. It's separate from that. It is. Did Alabama review this and determine if Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley violated simple code of conduct rules at the university? This isn't a violation of that. This wouldn't trigger any kind of suspension. And I've also seen a little bit of, well, this is clearly not Nate Oates' decision. Well, even if for whatever reason the people above Nate Oates' head decided that, we don't think that you absolutely have to discipline these two players, he's still the head coach of the program. He just got a major extension a few weeks after this happened within the past month. He can still make the ultimate decision to say, no, I want to do the right thing. It looks so much worse after the fact that all of these details come out with Brandon Miller's involvement in this. If he does not do this, it is not unthinkable. It seems relatively possible that this woman's life isn't taken. He brings the actual gun to the scene because it wasn't there to begin with. It's genuinely infuriating. And I'm not here for Alabama fans trying to justify this. Go ahead, GP.
If you don't have a rule in your program, to speak to the lack of punishment so far, that covers something along the lines of, hey, you're not allowed to drive around late at night, middle of the night with a loaded gun in your car. Like if you don't have a rule that something like that would fall under, then what kind of program are you running? It is outrageous that Brandon Miller has not been at least disciplined in some way, suspended in some way. And I think you could make a pretty compelling argument that he shouldn't be a member of the basketball program at all anymore. He did quite literally bring a gun to a scene that led to the death of a woman. It is not a stretch to suggest that if when he gets that text, he just texts back, no, I'll come pick you up. Let's just call it a night. Or no, I can't get involved in this situation. Just get a ride home and we'll talk about it when you get here. If he does any number of reasonable things, then this young woman, you can reasonably assume, is still alive. Instead, he made just about, if not clearly, the worst decision you can make, which is, hey, you guys have been out all night. Now you're in an altercation. Now you're asking me to bring you a loaded gun. Sure, I'll be there in a second. That's outrageous. Think about what basketball players and football players are suspended for sometimes. Smoking weed, breaking curfew, skipping class. You're going to tell me bringing a loaded gun to an altercation and that loaded gun subsequently being used to shoot and kill a woman doesn't rise to the level of some sort of punishment? That's outrageous. And any Alabama fan out there trying to rationalize this, and there's a bunch of them, they still arguing in my Twitter mentions right now, you are out of your mind, completely out of your mind. I love sports just like you love sports. I hope to God I never love any sports entity enough to make me so stupid when something like this pops up, because there are Alabama fans who I'm assuming are otherwise reasonable people who could not be twisting themselves in more ridiculous knots to try to rationalize why Brandon Miller is playing basketball with no interruption and still a member of this basketball team. And that press conference from Nate Oats on Tuesday afternoon was frankly embarrassing. And I say this as somebody who thinks Nate Oats is an unbelievable basketball coach, one of the best in the country. I respect him. I like him. I couldn't believe those words came out of his mouth. Wrong place, wrong time. What? No. Wrong place, wrong time is if you're at a party and you're minding your own business, you're having a good time, you're holding a drink, you're talking to whoever. And then over here on the other side of the room, something like this pops off. Bang, bang, bang. Wow. Now you are wrong place in the wrong time. You just having a good night and something wild happened in your vicinity. That's wrong place, wrong time. Brandon Miller wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time. He helped create the wrong place. He enhanced the wrong place. He brought the gun to the place, which immediately turned it into the wrong place, wrong time for a lot of other people who were out in Tuscaloosa that night. But Brandon Miller was not wrong place, wrong time. He didn't just happen to be somewhere where gunfire erupted. He brought the gun that led to the gunfire erupting. And there is also reports that his car blocked the vehicle of Cedric Johnson and Jamia Harris in a way that almost sounds like a mob hit or something you would see in a movie.
That doesn't make sense to me, though, because eventually that car leaves the street. So I'm not going to speak to the logistics of that, because GP, if that actually was the case, if there was clear intent there, then he would have been charged. I mean, this is very, very common sense. But regardless, his vehicle was in the vicinity, and then it wound up having 2 bullets hit its windshield.
Again, the report is that his car was blocking this other vehicle. Whether it was intentional or not is unclear. I have no idea, but it certainly doesn't sound great. And yeah, I don't know how this can be just swept to the side the way the Alabama athletic department just tried to sweep it to the side. Again, there's a long list of basketball players and football players who have been suspended for far less than carrying a gun to an altercation and then having that gun be used in what is now an alleged murder, in the shooting death of a young mother that left a 5-year-old little boy without his mom. And it is embarrassing that Alabama has just kept playing Brandon Miller without any interruption. And the one thing I'm certain of, absolutely certain of, is if the player who did this averaged 2 points a game instead of 19, he wouldn't be on this team right now. Absolutely not. Brandon Miller better be glad he's an All-American, because if he weren't, he wouldn't be on this team right now.
Yeah,
and I'll take it a step further. If it was another teenage African-American man who wasn't a star basketball player, I can't say for certain, but it wouldn't surprise me if he would actually be charged with a crime right now.
Yeah, there's a child out there that's not going to have a mom growing up. Jamia Harris isn't here, and it is sickening how avoidable this whole situation was, how unnecessary this whole situation was. You know, I'll speak to the bigger picture too as well. Paris mentioned this on a couple episodes back. Like, college basketball has been affected in many ways by gun violence throughout this season. Some of it unrelated to anyone on any given program. We just saw in a very emotional, cathartic moment happen Tuesday night at the Breslin Center with Michigan State. We'll get to that in a little bit. But, you know, there's the New Mexico State situation, which was a litany of things. But the first major headline of the season to come out of that program was a player bringing a gun to a situation in which he was lured under the false pretense of potentially meeting a young woman, but he had enough sense to know that it might not be right, so he brought a gun and then in self-defense and in retreat shot and killed a person. And now you have this situation on Nate Oats. I almost wonder if he went out of body, because it was so bizarre of a statement on Tuesday in the press conference. Like, he had to know this was coming. They knew the trial was happening. The preliminary trial was happening. He said they said a prayer for the young woman, Jamea Harris, but wrong place, wrong time. Can't control what happens outside of practice. It was mind-boggling. He did offer a follow-up statement, which I still feel fell way short. Still way short, but I'm going to read it. Because it was a statement that was put out on Tuesday night. Short, here it is. I thought it was important for me to clarify the unfortunate remarks I made earlier. This entire time, I've tried to be thoughtful in my words relative to this tragic incident, and my statements came across poorly. We were informed by law enforcement of other student athletes being in the vicinity, and law enforcement has repeatedly told us that no other student athletes were suspects. They were witnesses only. Our understanding is that they have been fully truthful and cooperative. In no way did I intend to downplay the seriousness of this situation or the tragedy of that night. My prayers continue to go out to Jamea Harris's family. That was his statement. There should have been much, much more, directly referencing the status and why it has been and apparently still is with Bradley and with Miller. This is a major failure of leadership, and it reflects poorly on Oats, obviously, on Bama, obviously, on the sport, obviously. But can we just have a bit more accountability? This is not players sneaking out in the middle of the night, breaking curfew to just do something like, harmless but nefarious, and then maybe it's a little bit of a story. This is literally life and death. Someone got killed. What are we doing here? They didn't disclose it from the start, and they would have been in a much better situation right now had they been more forthcoming, particularly because Jaden Bradley and Brandon Miller have not been charged. They are not suspects. They are not subject to an ongoing trial. If that is the case, you can offer more transparency. Continuing to hide behind word salad statements only make it worse for you as a program. The AD and Nate Oats still have more to atone for and to answer to.
If I were at Alabama in charge of something, I would say, okay, we messed this up. How do we make it better from this point? We can't undo what we've done, but how do we make it better from this point? And I would release a statement or hold a press conference today and say, just like the rest of you, we learned some things in Tuesday's testimony that we didn't previously know. And we are now compelled to hold Brandon Miller out of competition until, frankly, we can figure out exactly how we need to handle this situation. It wouldn't be great, but it'd be better than doing nothing. Because, again, as you noted, as I've noted, players are suspended all the time for stuff that doesn't even rise anywhere close to this level. Players get held out of games for smoking weed, for sneaking out, for all sorts of, relatively speaking, minor things. Brandon Miller took a loaded gun to a place, and that gun was minutes later used to kill a woman. That's got to be a violation of some sort of policy in your program. Otherwise, I don't know what kind of program you're running. And it struck me yesterday, and you mentioned Nate's press conference, which was just, even the language was just bad. Everything about it was bad. The words, the visual, everything was bad. It just sort of struck me yesterday. I talked about this on TV at least 3 different times yesterday. But before I said a word on TV, there was literally a team of people sitting together saying, okay, how do we talk about this, given what we know, without speculating too much? What would you say if you were asked this question? What would you say if you were asked that question? How would you discuss this? We went over it probably for 20 minutes, making sure everybody who was going to speak about this on national television understood the facts of the case, the details of the case, and understood what was reasonable to say and where a line that might be too far is drawn. It appears that my bosses were more concerned about what I might say about this than Nate Oats' bosses were about what he might say about this, which seems absolutely insane. It appears that I had more detailed conversations with higher ups about how I would discuss this situation publicly than Nate Oats did with his higher ups. And if that's not true, then I don't know what his higher ups were telling him, because that was a obviously embarrassing demonstration from him yesterday. And again, I say that as somebody who likes Nate, but I mean, what happened yesterday happened yesterday. I had people just like you, coaches, assistants, reaching out. And not one of them was like, there was actually somebody who called me who is close with Nate. I think they would consider themselves friends. And I swear to God, when I saw the name pop up on my phone, I was like, oh God, because I'm getting ready to go on TV. And this is what I thought. You get these calls all the time too, I'm certain. I thought it was going to be somebody close with Nate calling to say, hey, GP, what you don't understand is, hey, what you need to understand, or like, let me tell you what the situation Nate's in. And so I answered the call just because, I'm going to answer the call, but I was expecting that. And you know what I got instead? Are we off the record? Of course. What the F is Nate doing? What are they doing at Alabama? How is Brandon Miller not suspended? That came from a coach, from a person who is like friendly with Nate Oats. I think the coaching community, and I recognize it's easier for everybody to say what they would do when it's not them.
For sure.
But I didn't hear from a single coach who said, yeah, Brandon Miller should still be playing without any interruption. He didn't do anything wrong. People were like, what in the world was Brandon Miller doing? Particularly as a projected lottery pick worth millions of dollars. Like, to be clear, any college basketball player should not return that text, certainly should not respond to it in the way that Brandon Miller responded. It's reckless and foolish no matter who you are, student athlete or not. But it's especially crazy when you're a projected lottery pick worth millions of dollars and thus with more to risk than your average student, because this is now going to impact his NBA draft status. I don't know that it's the type of thing that's going to take him from being the 3rd pick to the 13th pick to the 23rd pick or anything like that. At some point, somebody's going to say he's too talented. We're just going to chalk it up to one poor decision. But these are questions he's going to have to answer. And NBA executives are going to have to determine, is this just a good young man who made a very poor decision? A good young man who is perhaps more impressionable than we would like him to be, but still at its core, not this kind of guy? Or are they they have to determine this guy's about this lifestyle, and that is representative of who he is. And if that is representative of who he is, he'll get a text message saying, bring me a loaded gun, and he'll just show up with the loaded gun. Well, then we got to be careful using a top 5, top 10, top 15 pick on somebody like that, investing millions of dollars. Who are we spending this pick on? Who are we investing this money in? I want to be clear. From this seat, I'm not comfortable making that declaration. I don't know Brandon Miller like that. He may be the best young man in the world who made just a stupid choice, or perhaps he's something different than that. I do not know. But I do know that NBA franchises, they will spend the next few months trying to figure that out, because this is going to be the main thing connected to how he's evaluated by NBA franchises in advance of the 2023 NBA draft.
Yeah, I think we've covered pretty much everything. I don't know if this is impacting, it shouldn't be, but I don't know if this is impacting the flow of this story. Again, if you're watching right now live, we appreciate you. In this hour, Brandon Miller is expected to be available tonight. That might not change. That might change. We've got a lot of hours to go before that game tips in Columbia, South Carolina. There's a number of people with the NCAA in Houston, or have been in Houston this week for a Final Four site review. When that happens, members of the selection committee also often will take those trips. I don't know if Greg Bird's on that trip or not, but isn't to say he can't do his job when he's not with the team. But not seeing them face to face, if that has even been the case, I don't have that verified. That might also be a reason why our failure to quicker action is the case. But we'll see on it. Disappointing story all around, and as eye-opening of a thing as we've seen, I would say in some time, but frankly, we've had a few other pretty atrocious stories in the sport this season.
If there are new developments, we'll let you know about them just as soon as we can. But for now, let's move on.